because I am someone who's quite self-driven, the big companies become frustrating after a while. The quality of software in the finance industry isn't the highest. If the interview process feels easy, that's kind of a bad sign.
Hey, welcome to developersindev.com, a community of young developers who wants to grow their tech careers. I hope you found useful the 360 interview with Ian Fuller, CTO at FREETRADE. I'm Jorge, software engineer and host of Developers in Dev. In this interview, we are gonna dive deep so much into Ian's profile. We will talk about Ian's background, working in fintech companies, what it's looked like to create and build software in a highly regulated industry like the fintech. If you really enjoy these type of videos, just please consider subscribe, thumbs up, share with your friends. That helps a lot. And also, if you have any other ideas of what other people we should interview next, just let us know in our email or in social network, Devs in Dev. Let's get started. So Ian is basically the VP of engineering here at FREETRADE, a really cool startup in London, and he has a really amazing background working on the top companies in the industry like Amazon, Snapchat, and even Motorola, when it used to be like a super cool company.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to bring Ian thoughts and ideas to the show. So let's get started. You study math and computer science in Bath, which is like number 6 ranked university here in UK. So it was just right in the middle of the dot-com bubble from 1998 to 2001. So what did you learn from all those years in the college?
The biggest thing was learning what I wanted to do as a career, I suppose. So I went in, it was like you say, mathematics and computing. Maths was fine, but you know, I hadn't done any kind of professional coding up until that point, you know, hadn't spent such an amount of time in it. So I totally learned from that experience that, yeah, computing was the way that I wanted to go after university.
Were you so, like, driven into that, like so decided, like I want to study computer science and math, or it was something like more like let's try and let's see? Yeah,
so at the time computing wasn't, you know, now they have like a dedicated computing course. At the time it was like mathematics and you can do some computing on the side. So you know, I knew I was interested in computing, didn't really know what it meant career-wise, so it wasn't like, you know, forefront in my mind. But after doing it for a couple of years, it was like, yeah, this is what I should be doing for a career.
So after you finished the college, you started in Motorola.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from those first years of experience working there?
It was great to spend all of my days coding. It was fantastic. You know, I definitely enjoyed that. You know, spent most of the time like upskilling compared to what I'd learned at college. I also learned that embedded software is not really what I wanted to do full time, so I took the time, you know, gaining the kind of foundational experience working there, and then in my spare time worked on some other projects as well, so some more kind of web, UI, visually focused projects.
Yeah, most of the time it's more important to understand what you don't like,
yeah,
so you can keep playing and keep understanding what I really want.
Exactly.
So that's really cool. And how did you get that first job, that first opportunity?
Yeah, it was quite a difficult recruitment process. So Motorola did what they call the milk round in the UK, so they go to the universities and try and recruit people from university. I went on this kind of one-day candidate interview process. There was about 20 candidates went through that process. It was quite extensive. There was like a fake board meeting that took place and a few other exercises like that. And as you say, it was just after the dot-com crash, so half of us, say 10 of us, were supposed to go through, and then they kind of stopped everything, notified all of us that maybe no one would be coming through. And then in the end, only 2 people managed to get through, so I was lucky enough to be one of those 2 people.
Wow, that's really cool. So it's really interesting because you have been, as you said, like working as writing software, but also now and many years in your career as a leader, as a manager. What are the main differences between both worlds?
When you write software, I mean, it can be difficult and sometimes you get unexpected results, but for the most part, what you put in, you get the same. It's deterministic, right? What comes out is the same. With people, that's not necessarily the case, and everybody's different, right? It's having, you know, maybe it's like dealing with several languages all in one go. So that's kind of the biggest bit of adapting you need to do.
So handling people, managing people.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so it's, basically, your point is, for me, it's really easy to write software because at the end of the day, you will find a way to make it work, and you don't necessarily depend on these external people and external factors. But when you are managing people, it's the opposite. It's just not about you, it's about others.
That's right, and you can't have, I think in software, and something that probably most engineers struggle with moving to engineering management, you have full control over the outcome, right? Even if something's very difficult, you work a bit harder at it, like change some external input and you get the right result. With people, that's not the same, especially with many people, that's not the same.
At which point of your career you decided, hey, I'm fine, I love writing software, but I want to manage people?
It happened a bit organically a few times in my career, in the sense of I was the most senior people in a small company. But when it really stood out, it was at Amazon. I felt that I could offer a lot more value by helping organize the teams. I felt that we could move faster as an engineering team if more structure was put in place. So I kind of pushed for that leadership role.
How could you describe your management style? How do you approach people? Making sure that you develop the best, or that's so Amazonian, but how do you develop other people?
Yeah, I quite like the Google expression actually, which is like trust and verify. So, we hire very senior people. We have certainly the first cohort has all been senior, so that I can really let people get on with the job. But then equally, I think it's important to go deep sometimes and really understand what's happening. Part of your role as a manager, as well as removing roadblocks for your team, is just to make sure that there's some degree of consistency and some structure that helps create that consistency. So making sure we're hiring, we have a very high bar, that our operational excellence is maintained to a high level, and that requires people to kind of make sure that takes place.
Can you first start telling what is FREETRADE, what are your mission, your goals? And why are you cool?
Yep. I mean, I'm actually a customer of FREETRADE, so I can easily talk about it from my point of view. Before FREETRADE, if I wanted to go and invest in the stock market, obviously you get stock options if you work at a big tech company, but otherwise there's no easy way in. And I literally went looking, and it's all very expensive. If you want to go and buy a share in Amazon, it's going to cost you £10 just to make the purchase, that kind of money. And also, it's very alienating if you don't know the space. There's lots of graphs, etc. For me, FREETRADE, when I found it, was like, wow, this is, it's a consumer-based app. Looks like using Spotify or whatever else it might be. Immediately drew me in, and it's going to be cheap as well, right? So ultimately, we want to give people like that access to the stock market and being able to invest for their future, kind of even things up a little bit.
So what made you change, you were working before at Snapchat?
Yeah.
Before coming here. So why that change? What brought you to FREETRADE, and why did you decide to take that decision to move here?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was actually a customer, so I was on the newsletter. So Victor, our CMO, sends out some pretty fun newsletters, and I spotted that the new office they moved in was actually right above the office that Snapchat was in. So that's how the conversation started. But why move anyway? As I was saying, it's a product that I really truly believe in, and also, we're at a very exciting stage. We're growing quickly right now. I think we could become a world player, and to be at that from 10 or 12 people upwards is a very exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and also I would say that coming as a VP of engineering and create that impact and basically create all these processes and bring people, I think that sounds really exciting. How are you now going through that part of your career? How are you feeling that now?
Yeah, so I think when you work at a bigger company, if you're aspirational, you've been working hard, you have a lot of these ideas, but it can be hard to implement. So like you say, working at a smaller company is an opportunity to put those things in place. And so far, they've gone okay. They've definitely got us through the last 9 months, and we scaled the company, it's 4 times the size that it was. It's going to continue to be a challenge, but it kind of feels like you say, a perfect learning opportunity, the same way as if you new to a bit of technology, it's very exciting when you're at that first stage.
So now I would like to understand better what it means to be a VP of engineering, and of course especially here in FREETRADE. So what are your responsibilities and what is your day-to-day look like?
I think a VP of engineering or a CTO, the key goal is you need to make sure that you ship software, to customers, not just build it, but actually ship it to people, and that it's of very high quality. And something that's unique to FREETRADE or unique to financial startups is that it really needs to have a certain amount of trust, and you can only build that trust by building quality into the product. So from an engineer's point of view, it's actually a great opportunity because we can't really be slapdash.
So then I guess adding to that, you need to be close to the business and to the CEO, or how does this kind of relationship work in your regular normal day?
So we'll have regular exec meetings where we go through key things which don't happen operationally, things outside of operational, so what's happening to the business, or things which might significantly impact the business, even from a technology point of view. There's also a responsibility on me to start to develop a framework for how we manage those things as we scale. So understanding what potential future costs might be to the business from a technology point of view, or what like security risk might be from a technology point of view. That's the kind of more strategic work. And then, you know, a couple of hours later, I might be fixing a bug to help the team out.
So for me, I could say that the most important part to have a successful team is most of the time the culture. How people work with each other and what are those relationships, and yeah, like come to your workplace and feeling happy and feeling excited of what you're doing and proud. So if you need, how could you describe the culture, the engineering culture for FREETRADE?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of putting together some engineering values right now, which hopefully encapsulates some of that. We have like 4 key values at the company level, and then in the engineering team we kind of extend those. So a key one we have at the business level is like ownership, and within the engineering team, like pragmatism and being product focused, some things that we introduce into that. And just generally, I think you know, we've got like a hard work culture. You know, there's some really important stuff that we're building, but we also know when it's important to like take a break, take the time off, and you know, like go and have a social, whatever it might be.
And when it comes basically to create that culture, how do you create them? Like, how do you start saying this is the kind of engineers that we are looking for?
I think it's very hard to make a culture once you already hired people. I think what you really have to do is look at the team you have. Obviously, you've like hired them or like engineered it in a particular way that you have that team, and then start to formalize that culture. So kind of write down what your values are. And then from that point on, make sure you adhere to them. And that is like, you know, you've got to hire for them. So you actually got to look out for those indicators when hiring. And you've got to make sure at performance review that you're using those things. And in 360 feedback within the team, you know, how are these things being referenced? And that's really powerful when it comes to making big decisions. It's like, okay, how should we behave here? What are the values we adhere to? And that kind of helps.
And how much do you think when it comes to creating a new company or coming to a new company, you brought from all your past career? It's like you see many influences from you from working for Snapchat or Amazon for the kind of culture here, or you start from scratch and say, let's see where it goes?
Definitely leverage what you learn from bigger companies. So for me, Amazon has like fantastic procedures in place, you know, good processes in place to make sure things happen in the right way. Snap was really good, you know, has a mix of Amazon and Google engineers, and I think what that taught me is actually to, you know, take risks a little bit. You know, that you don't have to be so constrained around a single problem, then you can look for new opportunities.
What do you think at this point of FREETRADE are first the technical challenge as a FREETRADE as a company, and then your more role-oriented challenges? Yeah,
the biggest technical challenges we have, or a few actually, but the financial industry is quite opaque, and the technology providers don't really set a very high standard. So I think, yeah, they you know, go through the processes, but I think a lot of legacy technology companies within finance see technology as a cost center rather than a core part of the business. Obviously at FREETRADE, like, technology is the business. We're a technology company, we make an app. So working with those legacy providers is a big challenge. We're undertaking some big projects. We're bringing some of the software that we currently use in-house and building it ourselves. That's kind of a massive undertaking. And then from a process point of view, we've got to make sure we have the structure for the teams to scale. So we've already started an exercise around that to break the company up into what we think are the best kind of silos, the best ways of executing. And then more long-term is making sure that what I find important and what the other leaders find important is communicated, documented, and systemized in a way that, like, the entire team can continue with those things and we can scale.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting that you mentioned that since you are working with other banks or with other platforms that you need to integrate and get data from or send data to, you mentioned that they are not the most straightforward systems that you could potentially handle. Why is that? Because I don't come from security or banking or fintech background, The way I always see this is, oh, high security, really high quality software, but maybe it's not the case. So what's going on there?
So I should say first and foremost, like, your money's safe. There is a lot of process that exists around the technology that makes sure that nothing really fails. But I think we've seen with some public examples recently that actually the quality of software in the finance industry isn't the highest. Like I said, I think the key reason there is that technology is not seen as a core part of the business. It's seen as like a cost to the business. Only when you bring technology and the business together along with product, you really make something that works well and like serves a purpose.
You could say that if a person is thinking, I want to work in fintech, a startup like FREETRADE is gonna be better from the engineering point of view, because I don't know, maybe you can use more recent technologies, different processes.
Yeah, definitely. You know, again, I'll talk about like pragmatism. You know, we know what we have to do from a compliance point of view. We want to be ahead of that. But we also know that we can leverage new technologies, and that allows us to move more quickly. It's more fun for engineers who join this kind of team, and it means we can build a better product with less effort.
What is the most interesting project you have worked in FREETRADE?
Definitely, we're building a brokerage platform in-house right now. It's quite a complex beast. It's going to be a lot of effort. The guys are going to be working on it probably this quarter and another quarter ahead, but it's, you know, employs something called event sourcing, which is quite interesting, and it definitely has the most depth to it.
Cool. So now, like, the last questions of the interviews. So the banking sector is, you know, you're working with real money, and
yep.
That's very challenging. So how could you describe the difference between working in another non-banking company and writing software in a bank? Like, what are the main difference, or the way people should think differently?
Yeah, I mean, if you're most kind of diligent engineers who really care about their craft, it's kind of the ideal role in many ways, because you know, you may be forced in some companies to kind of ship without tests, but that's actually, you know, the compliance risk analysis you do as a financial company that you're obligated to do. But if you were lucky enough to have Dan, who leads the kind of compliance team, really ensure that like there's a process that exists where the engineers are kind of brought to task, or have to explain and justify the quality of the software they have. So if we have an outage, we need to take a record of the outage, like how long did it last for, and then we need to have like a post-mortem process in place, and from that we can say, well, we need more automated tests here, or we need to take more time on this thing. So it's kind of an ideal situation for building good software.
Mm-hmm. So now, like, what are the technologies that you're most excited about?
Yeah.
Or what are the kind of fields inside of the engineering that you're really, really passionate?
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of serverless. We had a blog post recently that talked about that. You know, I think that's the way that most people would be shipping software, the same way that most people don't have their own on-premise hardware anymore. I think there's some challenges in that, but it's constantly improving. So it's kind of nice to kind of work through that and see what, you know, the cloud providers bring out. Also quite interested in a design pattern that we're using here to help us kind of shore up the accounting process, and that's something called event sourcing, and that gives you some real safety in the way that the software is built and gives you a good understanding of where everybody's money is at all times.
How do you see, like, if you need to like envision the future,
yeah,
5 years from now, how good you want to see FREETRADE?
I really, you know, if anyone is thinking about investing, like, we're the app that they think of. The same way, you know, from a banking point of view, you think of Monzo, if you think of a new fintech, I want us to be like that for investing. Like, we're building the team to do that right now. I think we can definitely, you know, if we execute well over the next couple of years, we can definitely get there.
And how do you see the future of banking?
How do I see the future of banking? A lot more frictionless. I think a lot of barriers. When banking was first made digital rather than digitized, there was a lot of like knee-jerk panic. I don't know if you recall, but first you could access it online, then everyone started to send you dongles, and it actually became more painful to bank. I think we're going to solve those problems in different ways now, kind of security problems in different ways. It's going to be much easier to share money as well, and share your resources and understand your money. So you might have an investment account with us, but you know, you may have a cash savings account with somebody else, and you put those two things together and be able to see a summary of it.
So now we're going to switch a little bit more into tips and lessons learned in all those years of career, like more than 18 years of career. So let's start hard. Like what were the biggest mistakes in your careers and the biggest lessons learned from you?
On the leadership side, it would definitely be the kind of shit sandwich. It's the idea of delivering feedback, you know, and kind of putting something nice on either side of it. I think isn't good for either party. Like if you're a leader, you should definitely kind of tear the plaster off, give the feedback people need to hear so that they can improve. And it'll also help you as a leader because, you know, you're more likely to get a strong response to that, and maybe you can take something away from it too.
Yeah, I have like mixed feelings with this kind of sandwich feedback. Because at the end of the day, it's like, you're giving something nice, then you're giving something that is not that nice, and then something nice. Don't you think like your message, like kind of like, don't go straight to the point? Like, why do you think it's useful?
Because it gets lost. So you give someone the feedback and they walk out of the room and they just remember the last bit, which was like, you know, pretty nice, right? And you keep giving that feedback and then the person doesn't realize they maybe have something they really need to work on and improve. And if you want to scale your team up, you need to give that feedback straight so they can action it. And it's painful, you know, for both sides, but it's actually a lot easier than letting things run too far and then having to give the direct feedback.
So you would say like learning how to give feedback was key for you?
Yeah, definitely.
At the beginning you didn't necessarily understand how to, you know?
Yeah, I tried to dress it up too much, yeah.
Cool. I've seen, and whenever I'm talking with people that are in their universities or out of the college, they are kind of obsessed by the idea like, I want to work for Google, I want to work for Amazon, I want to work for a big company just because they have the name. Yeah. They have, I mean, they are cool in a way. What are the main differences between a big company like Amazon, a medium company like a Snapchat, and a small company like FREETRADE, a small kind of company?
Yeah, I think the bigger companies, and you know, Snapchat was still 1,000 engineers, so you still have to be fairly organized at that size. To survive for that amount of time, you know, against the competition, the engineering teams have to be fairly well organized, right? If they were bad engineering teams, they really wouldn't make it that far. So you know, if you go into a big company, if you know a little bit about the business, you have some decent expectations or kind of fair expectations of what the engineering team might look like. With a startup, it's harder to know like what the quality of the team is going to be like. I say if you're looking for a career in a startup, I'd say the best way to judge them is through the interview process. If the interview process feels easy, that's kind of a bad sign. They might have hired some great people by chance, but also they're very likely to have hired not very good people because they haven't measured for the important things. So, yeah.
Do you think a startup is the right place just out of the university? Would you choose like, now suppose that we are 18 years ago. Do you think it's the right fit when you are out of the university, or you are missing some parts that a big company can give you?
I would say an engineering team, so whatever the company size is, 10, 20 engineers with a good hiring process and, you know, a good leveling process within the team. I think you could get a lot of value out of that. And it depends on your character really at that stage as well. So if you're somebody who is really kind of self-driven, then I think you may find there's greater opportunity to be had at that startup. And if you're someone who's not really sure what you want to be doing, then a big company can kind of offer that direction.
So what do you like and dislike about big companies, and what do you like and dislike about a startup?
I think, because I am someone who's quite self-driven, the big companies become frustrating after a while. So, you know, first year or so, or first 6 months, you kind of find your feet kind of fitting into the company. And then 12 months runs around and, you know, you're really starting to make an impact. But after you get like a year and a half, 2 years, you know, it's hard for you to push outside of the realms of kind of structure you might be working in. Some companies do better than others at moving people around and kind of enabling that opportunity. But I think, yeah, if you're very like self-driven, that can become a frustration. On the startup side, it's kind of the inverse of that. So for me, there's a great opportunity to make an impact and to define how things should work. But sometimes, you know, you kind of need a break, and that opportunity doesn't come around so easily.
Yeah, that's real interesting, right? Because when you are in a big company, you know, like, I mean, you are covered in a way, or you're secure in a way.
Yeah.
And in a startup, it's more risky because, like, hey, listen, if we don't do this right, or our customers are not happy and we don't grow the business, maybe the VC people or the investors will come and say, hey, we don't believe in you anymore. So is it something like as a top leader, how do you protect yourself to not be to be clear and say this is the vision, this is where we go, and if other stakeholders come and say, hey, what about this and that, you protect the people around you.
So making sure we're kind of going in the right direction, we use like a process for that actually, which is OKRs, and there's some really clear things we need to do from, say, the customer perspective, and then there's some more strategic things which maybe run slightly longer, and we try and put those together and use like OKRs, objectives and key results, a way of formalizing like the direction the company should be heading in, right? So at the top it's very much like this is the kind of way the ship's heading, and then we kind of work out from there what things we can do to make that happen.
So now let's talk more about junior engineers. So from all of the years of careers, what are the biggest mistakes that junior engineers or people out of the college make when they start in a new team? Because for me, most of the time it's all about earning trust of the people, making sure that you have the right mindset. But what are the biggest mistakes that you have seen?
I think one thing that can be a little bit frustrating is, when you're a junior engineer, and I'm sure I didn't do a good job of this, but you have to remember that, although you might know this part of the industry quite well, there's probably a certain number of bits you don't know well, and those things layer on top of each other as well. So there's kind of more system design, architecture stuff. It's very hard to pick that up with a limited amount of time. So you just have to be prepared to, put in the extra work to find out what those things look like. So if you're working with the team and you find yourself coming up with a roadblock, ask for help, definitely reach out for help, but also understand where it's an area where you're asking for more help on average. Take the time to go and kind of bolster your knowledge in the area. Go and read a book on it. Ask people actually in the team, like, how can I improve myself in this area? And people will be very happy to help you with that.
So you mentioned before that from time to time, do you take weekends off to create a project or work with a new technology? But something that I found challenging is how do you integrate the learning process, like reading books, doing courses, and all this stuff in your day-to-day life while you need to ship, you need to move fast?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. So the best way you form habits really is you kind of force them a little bit. So I have an app I think it's called Habits, and it literally prompts me to do things on a regular basis. So I take the time in the morning just to read for 20 minutes. I'm lucky enough that I go on a train, so it makes quite a good gap for that. But it's very easy to think, we've got to ship this thing today, so maybe I should leave that. So I really, really kind of try and force myself. And then, at the end of that process, I'm generally quite grateful because something will pop up at work and I'll think, I've actually read about that as an article I can share that just happens to coincide with some work that we're doing.
Now, let's just step back a little bit and let's talk more of you as a manager and as a person that needs to grow teams. Right now, I think you have around 6 new opportunities open for hiring new people, from apps developers to backend. So what have you found the most critical part, or the most important part, or the most the bottlenecks when you need to grow teams?
Finding people is generally.
So finding people, do you mean how do you discover them, or how do you try to persuade them to come to your office and talk and sell the idea?
Yeah, I think there just aren't many senior engineers of the level that we expect of FREETRADE not working in London. So they're all what generally referred to as passive candidates. That means they're already working somewhere else. So getting people working somewhere else to come and work for you is obviously quite a time-expensive project, and you may get so far and then they decide they're going to stay with their current role, or they're going to move to somewhere else. So that's just a great challenge in terms of time and effort.
And what have you learned with that challenge? How do you convince those people to come to work with you?
Yeah. Building a profile of the company has been really important. So we've got a blog, which I'm sure you've seen, that's got some pretty great content on that now from the engineering team and from the rest of the team. And we had a candidate the other day, and she probably wouldn't have continued with the she got a thing in her inbox saying, we used to talk to us at FREETRADE, and it was because she went and looked at the blog. She thought, this is an interesting company, they're working on some great stuff, that she took that step forward. So definitely I'd say for small startups, promoting yourself properly is an important factor.
Let's suppose that you say in 1 year from now you need to grow 100 new people, which it's crazy, and it's a huge growth. How do you scale your teams? How do you now that you're growing in FREETRADE, how can you keep having the culture, a healthy culture, and how can you make sure that those new people get together good with the people that is currently working now here?
So specifically on the culture side, I think I was just reading an article the other day, like hiring for culture is actually a really important thing. So obviously we have a technical process, but we also have a completely separate kind of cultural interview process. And as we get bigger, we need to formalize not just what kind of questions are seen there, but how we reflect on those questions as a team. So, you know, we have debriefs after an interview process, and we refer to what we see as our company values or what we see as our kind of leveling guidelines, and use that to assess whether or not somebody's a good fit for the team.
So basically creating the framework and make sure that on new hirings, like, is the kind of way you think about the company or the culture and the team. Yeah, it's really nice. So now let's suppose that I'm like just out of the college.
Yeah.
How can I get an opportunity for work for FREETRADE? What are the keys or the values that are you looking for, like for a junior person?
So if you've been to a good university and you've worked hard, you're probably good at coding. You know, most of your co-students will be good at. If you've been to a strong university, I think you've probably done a good job at getting the basics down. For me, the thing that would make you stand out, the thing that would make you stand out on the CV, is if you've been working on some of your own projects. Because I think taking that, expertise, but just in writing some software maybe to solve coding problems at university, but turning it into building a product is quite a different challenge. And I think if you're truly motivated about technology, it's not just a way of getting a career so you can pay the bills, you're probably going to be doing that anyway. So most strong candidates are doing something in their spare time. And that doesn't mean committing to some big open source project. It could just mean building a website, for a family member, or building an app that you wanted on your phone. But I think those are great indicators.
So you mentioned the CV or the resume. What are the biggest mistakes that you have seen from people making?
That surprises me every time, but that happens quite a lot, is someone just lists a really perfunctory kind of CV. It just says, I made this thing, I worked well with teammates. It doesn't tell you anything more than where you worked really, and the project names that you worked on. So a good CV for me, you describe the kind of problems that you're solving, like why they were valuable problems to the business, and what you learned from those problems.
What you're saying is don't list buzzwords, so don't list cool things just because you know that are important in a resume. Just make sure that you list your impact and why should I hire you, or
And also just what was you could say I built a fintech app, right? But why was that hard, right? So I built a fintech app and I had to solve a difficult double bookkeeping problem that had the following challenges. It had concurrency challenges. You're talking about the problem because you're probably passionate about the work that you've done as well.
So now in FREETRADE, you have a very solid senior engineers in place. So you are also hiring new juniors people. But my question, for a startup like this, how can you make sure that you bring people, junior people, because it's important and it's a different diverse talent, but how can you make sure that they can start shipping fast? And how can you make sure that their onboarding process is really nice and efficient?
I actually think it's interesting, but you could have been coding for 10 years, but if you walk into a new company, it's a new code base, it's new processes, they have a different way of signing in some services. Onboarding is critically important for senior people, the same as it is for junior people. So we got on that pretty early on, built started off as a simple document that onboarded you into the team, and we've kind of progressed that over time. So we started to build out runbooks. Now if you're on call, they give you an idea of what you need to look for and how you need to debug the situation. And having those tools in place mean that not only is it good for senior engineers, but when juniors join, they can cut up to speed really quickly. And I think because we have a good foundation of senior engineers, we can feed junior engineers smaller, more contained tasks as part of a bigger project that senior engineers are working on, and they start to build that experience, and then we can move on to the rest of the code base.
Cool. So now the last questions of the interviews. So the banking sector is, you're working with real money, and that's very challenging. So how could you describe the difference between working in another non-banking company and writing software in a Like, what are the main difference or the way people should think differently?
Yeah, I mean, if you're most kind of diligent engineers who really care about their craft, it's kind of the ideal role in many ways, because you know, you may be forced in some companies to kind of ship without tests, but that's actually, you know, the compliance risk analysis you do as a financial company that you're obligated to do. But if you were lucky enough to have Dan, who leads the kind of compliance team, really ensure that like there's a process that exists where the engineers are kind of brought to task or have to explain and justify the quality of the software they have. So if we have an outage, we need to take a record of the outage, like how long did it last for, and then we need to have like a post-mortem process in place, and from that we can say, well, we need more automated tests here, or we need to take more time on this thing. So it's kind of an ideal situation for building good software.
Mm-hmm. So now, like, what are the technologies that you're most excited about?
Yeah.
Or what are the kind of fields inside of the engineering that you are really, really passionate?
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of serverless. We had a blog post recently that talked about that. You know, I think that's the way that most people will be shipping software, the same way that most people don't have their own on-premise hardware anymore. I think there's some challenges in that, but it's constantly improving. So it's kind of nice to kind of work through that and see what, you know, the cloud providers bring out. I'm also quite interested in a design pattern that we're using here to help us kind of shore up the accounting process, and that's something called event sourcing. And that gives you some real safety in the way that the software is built and gives you a good understanding of where everybody's money is at all times.
How do you see, like, if you need to like envision the future,
yeah,
5 years from now, how good you want to see FREETRADE?
I really, you know, if anyone is thinking about investing, like, we're the app that they think of. The same way, you know, from a banking point of view, you think of Monzo, if you think of a new fintech. I want us to be like that for investing. Like, we're building the team to do that right now. I think we can definitely, you know, if we execute well over the next couple of years, we can definitely get there.
And how do you see the future of banking?
How do I see the future of banking? A lot more frictionless. I think a lot of barriers. When banking was first made digital rather than digitized, there was a lot of like knee-jerk panic. I don't know if you recall, but first you could access it online, then everyone started to send you dongles, and it actually became more painful to bank. I think we're going to solve those problems in different ways now, kind of security problems in different ways. It's going to be much easier to share money as well, and share your resources and understand your money. So you might have an investment account with us, but you know, you may have a cash savings account with somebody else, and you put those two things together and be able to see a summary of it.
Cool. Now I want you to take like this video and those people that are watching, and I would like you to give a message, like an advice or something that you want people, like especially people that are out of the university, remember, and something that you feel like it's really important to say.
Yeah, I mean, for me it would be just like whatever you find that you're passionate about, just go deep on that, keep working hard at that, and you'll find that your career happens anyway.
So passion.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. That's the end.
Yay! That was the end of the interview with Ian Fuller. I hope you really enjoyed that one. If you like it, please share it with your friends so more people will know this show, Developers in Depth. You cannot imagine how much helpful that is. Also, if you want more video like this one, please consider donating. You will find the link down below. And that's pretty much it. Oh, and by the way, the next interview is gonna be with someone that works for Facebook. Keep tuned because it's coming very soon.